All right, good afternoon. We'll go ahead and call to order the regular meeting for the City of Murfreesboro Board of Zoning Appeals for September 23, 2009. First item on the agenda is the consideration of minutes for the regular meetings of July 29th, 2009 and August 26, 2009. Are there any changes to those minutes? All right, if not, those minutes will stand approved then as presented. We'll move on to new business. First application under new business is a special use permit and variance request, application Z09057 by Mr. Greg Holder for Believers Tabernacle, requesting a special use permit in order to expand an existing institutional group assembly use, a place of worship in a residential single-family RS-15 zone. And this is for property located at 700 County Farm Road. The applicant is also requesting a 28-foot variance of the minimum required 40-foot front setback for principal structures and a 10-foot variance of the minimum required 12.5-foot side setback for principal structures on the same property. Mr. Blum, if you'd review that application for us, please.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Chairman Rogers, and good afternoon to Chairman Rogers and to all the members of the Board of Zoning Appeals today. As Chairman Rogers mentioned, the subject property is at 700 County Farm Road, which is located along the south side of County Farm Road, just to the southeast of the Stevens Bend subdivision, the very southernmost tip of the city limits. And I'll show you on the aerial photograph right now. There's the church property there. Just to the west is undeveloped land that Park Trust owns that will be a future section of the Chestnut Hill subdivision. And as I mentioned, Stevens Bend, which is a subdivision that's in the city limits, is just to the northeast. And to the east of the subject property, I said northeast, I meant northwest. To the east of the subject property are some scattered single-family residences located outside of the corporate limits of the city of Murfreesboro. Directly to the east is an old mobile home site. That mobile home is no longer there. And across the street, across County Farm Road, is a cemetery. According to the applicants, the church has been there since sometime during the late 1800s. The property was annexed into the city limits in June of 2007, so definitely predates the annexation into the city limits and the application of the city zoning regulations. The applicants moved into the subject facility several years ago, and now they would like to do some expansions. Because the subject property has never been approved for a special use permit, any kind of expansion of that facility has to come to the Board of Zoning Appeals for a special use permit. What's there now in the RS-15 zoning district on this property is grandfathered in, but any expansion has to go through this process. And so that's why they are here before you today to request a special use permit in order to build 2 additions onto their facility. And as you can see on the overhead now, I'll show you a site plan of the property. Here is the existing church. And what they are proposing to do is to construct an addition on the front, which would be a new vestibule for the church. And they are proposing to construct an addition in the rear corner as a multi-purpose room. There's quite a steep slope to the property. And there's the church parking lot is to the rear of the church, as well as along the east side property line as well. Currently, there is some existing parking along the front of the church that backs directly out onto County Farm Road. The applicant is planning on removing that parking that backs directly onto County Farm Road and replacing it with a perimeter planting yard with trees and shrubs to meet our minimum landscaping requirements, and to also remove one non-conforming element of the site, which, as you know, institutional group assembly uses are not allowed to have parking to where it backs out onto the public street, and so that would be eliminating that non-conforming aspect of their site. Well, before I remove that slide, I'll just point out the two other requests. The applicant is also requesting a 28-foot variance of the minimum required 40-foot front setback in the RS-15 zoning district. The existing structure is not conforming to that 40-foot front setback. As I mentioned, it was built prior to being annexed into the city. What they're looking to do is replace an old existing staircase that has quite a steep slope and goes right out into the pavement of the existing parking lot in front of the church. The addition would actually be further away from the street than that existing staircase actually is right now. Of course, the staircase would be removed and would be replaced with this front addition. They're also requesting a 10-foot side setback variant to the minimum required 12.5-foot side setback because their staircase would now be internal and it wouldn't be just a straight shot. It would actually be somewhat of a winding staircase so that it wouldn't be a straight drop down. And that staircase would be here on the side of on the east side of the west side of the building, indoors instead of outdoors. I think what will kind of give you some perspective on the existing building would be some photographs. That's the existing church, and this is the staircase that they're looking to remove. And the main purpose for the construction of this vestibule, other than to get more space, would be to remove this staircase, which I believe some of their older members have some trouble navigating. To give you even better perspective than that shot would be kind of a profile view of the staircase. Of course, this parking here that's in front of the church is what I was alluding to before. That would go away and landscaping would be installed. And what would a Board of Zoning Appeals meeting be without the obligatory escort shot? I wouldn't want to disappoint.
Too late.
This is a view of the back of the church. That addition will be in this area here, and you can see there's quite a slope from the rear parking lot down to County Farm Road. Here's an architectural view, and Mr. Mike Pickelsheimer, the architect for the church, is here in attendance if you have any questions for him. But the front of the church, this is what the front will look like. The church is currently white vinyl siding. From the second story up, the church will attempt to replicate that. And when I say second story, of course, the property slopes down so far that when you get close to County Farm Road, there is quite a difference in elevation from grade to the top of the structure. So it's a taller structure at the front of the church than it is at the rear of the church, as you can tell by this side view right here. But the first floor materials there would be either stone or brick, and then above that would be replicating the white vinyl siding that's already there on the rest of the building. As I mentioned, the church is planning two additions. The existing church is 4,861 square feet, and the two additions would total 2,000 square feet. The addition in the front would consist of a 1,285 square foot vestibule, and the addition in the back, the multi-purpose room, would be 715 square feet. The applicants, with regards to the variance requests, are proposing their justification to be that for one, they are attempting to actually remedy a safety problem, and two, that they are working with a lot that is non-conforming in size, that really to remedy this safety problem, they have very limited options with regards to where they can expand the church facility and make it more accessible. As I mentioned, some aspects of this development are grandfathered in. For example, the site does not meet the minimum lot size of 1.03 acres, but once again, it predates its annexation into the city limits. There still will be some parking that will be in the required front yard along that side property line. That is another thing that is grandfathered in. We did not require the church to submit a photometric lighting plan because they are not planning on adding any parking lot lighting that would increase the foot candle levels. So we did not require them to submit a photometric lighting plan. With that being said, I'll be happy to answer any questions. If the board approves the special use permit request for the building expansion, staff recommends the following conditions. The site plan must be reviewed and approved administratively by the planning and engineering staff because this is below the threshold for planning commission review. It would be reviewed administratively. And as a function of its site plan review, the planning and engineering department will have final architectural review and approval of the building, and all building orientation requirements must be met to the satisfaction of the planning and engineering staff. Number two, the landscape plan will be subject to the final review and approval of the city horticulturist. And if the board approves the variance request, staff recommends the following condition for both. A surveyor will be required to help lay out the footing of the vestibule addition, and a surveyor's certification must be provided that the building addition is no closer than 12 feet from the front property line and 2.5 feet from the west side property line. Mr. Holder, the applicant, is in attendance if you have any questions for him, and I'll be happy to answer any questions as well.
All right, thank you, Mr. Blomley. Any questions for Mr. Blomley?
Mr. Chairman, I don't have any questions, but I'm going to abstain from voting on this application due to a conflict with the applicant and, of course, abstain from discussion on this.
All right, we'll put that in the minutes. All right, thank you, Mr. Blomley. Mr. Holder, is there anything you'd like to add to this application?
No, sir.
All right, then at this time, we'll go ahead and conduct a public hearing. Anyone present wishing to speak for or against this application, if you would, please come forward to the podium, state your name, your address, and any comments that you might have. All right, seeing none, we'll declare the public hearing closed and open the floor for any further discussions, questions, or motions. We are dealing with three separate issues here, probably require three separate motions. Special use permit, then the 28-foot variance, and then the 10-foot variance.
Chairman Rogers, if there's no other discussion, I'll make a motion that we approve the special use permit subject to all staff comments.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, we'll move then to the request for the 28-foot variance of the minimum required 40-foot front setback.
I make a motion that we approve the 28-foot variance with the consideration of the terms and the conditions.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, and finally, we'll address the request for the 10-foot variance of the minimum required 12.5-foot side setback.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion we approve the 10-foot variance, subject to staff comments.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, Mr. Holder, all three of those components of the application have been granted. Appreciate you coming in today. Thanks very much. All right, we'll move next to application Z09058 by Ms. Mimi Kiesling for Rutherford County Government requesting a special use permit in order to operate a temporary mobile recycling center in a commercial highway zone for property located at 125 John R. Rice Boulevard. And before we get started on that, I'll let the board members know, Ms. Brenda, that I'm going to abstain from that one myself because of my service on the county commission. All right, Mr. Blum, if you'd review that application for us, please.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Chairman Rogers. This is the third year in a row that we've had a request for a temporary mobile recycling center in the parking lot of the Sam's Club. This request will essentially be identical to the last 2 years' requests. No changes are being requested at this time. As you know, temporary mobile recycling centers are allowed to operate under a special use permit for no greater than 12 months that can be renewed annually by the Board of Zoning Appeals. In this case, Ms. Kiesling is making application to renew the special use permit for another 12 months as the Sam's Club location has fast become, over the last 2 years, a heavily relied upon site for recycling in the city of Murfreesboro. This special use permit renewal would last from October 1st, 2009 through September 30th, 2010. A letter from Sam's Club granting permission for 6 containers, which is what the applicants have made a request for, is included in your agenda materials. And I'll show you now on the overhead the existing auto repair facility at Sam's is on this side of the building, and the containers are in this area here. And that's consistently where they've been over the last several years. Because this is essentially the same operation as it's been over the last several years, I won't go into great detail. I will show you some photographs that I took last week. You'll recall that last year, one of the things that was brought up in the staff comments and to the board members was that the maintenance of the sites was there was a little bit left to be desired as far as the maintenance of the sites, and we received a strong commitment from Rutherford County to better maintain those sites. And I just wanted to show these photographs to demonstrate to the board that Rutherford County has taken seriously that request, and the sites are, and I think that many of us drive by these on a regular basis, are being maintained very well, and I certainly applaud Ms. Kiesling and her staff for the maintenance of those sites. That has greatly improved over the last year. And and one of the reasons why this goes to the Board of Zoning Appeals is to make sure that it doesn't have any negative impact on the surrounding area. And certainly great strides have been made in the last year, and we appreciate that. With that being said, I'll be happy to answer any questions before or after the public hearing. Ms. Kiesling is here also if you have any questions for her.
All right, thank you, Mr. Blumley. Any questions for Mr. Blumley? All right, thank you. Ms. Kiesling, anything you'd like to add? Got a quiet crowd today. All right, then at this time we'll go ahead and conduct a public hearing. Anyone present wishing to speak for or against this application, if you would, please come forward. And seeing none, we'll declare the public hearing closed and open the floor for any further discussion or motion.
Mr. Chairman, if there's no further discussion, I'll move for approval of the special use permit, subject to any staff comments.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. I successfully abstained from voting on that. I've had issues with that in the past.
Chairman Rogers, if I may, just for a point of information, some of you may have been curious. The last 2 years we've seen special use permit requests go in tandem with this for the site on Haley Road for a temporary mobile recycling center as well. The county has actually submitted a site plan to make that a permanent recycling center, in which case is permitted by right in the heavy industrial zoning district, and so they're in the process of going through the site plan review process right now, and so they have plans for that site to make it a permanent site. So that will be one that we probably won't be seeing anymore, because that'll be a permanent site.
Very good. All right, thank you, Mr. Bond. Mr. Kiesling, thank you. The application has been granted. We sure do appreciate you coming in, and appreciate all your efforts that you do to help Murfreesboro and Rutherford County recycle. Thank you. All right, we'll now move on to our next item. It's a special permit request for relief from the noise ordinance, application Z09059 by Reverend Moses Pope for Spring Hill Missionary Baptist Church, requesting a special use permit for relief from the noise ordinance for property located at 209 South Bilbro Avenue. The applicant is requesting a maximum noise level of 73 decibels on Saturdays from 11:30 a.m. to 1 p.m. and on Sundays from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. and 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. Mr. Blomley, if you'd review that application for us, please.
Thank you, Chairman Rogers. The subject property is located, as you mentioned, at 209 South Bilbro. I'm going to show the aerial photograph right now, please. There's the church property there. Property is zoned RS8, and church has been there, from my research, looking in our Polk city directories. There has been a church there at least since the 50s. I could not find out exactly when the church was constructed. The current occupants, the Spring Hill Missionary Baptist Church, have been there since approximately 1994, 1995. They are requesting relief from the noise ordinance, and I know this is something that we don't see very often, but the Board of Zoning Appeals is actually the board that's been designated to handle requests for relief from the noise ordinance, and it's actually termed a special permit for relief from the noise ordinance. The applicants, during their choir rehearsals and Sunday services, have actually been exceeding the maximum decibel levels that are allowed in residential zoning districts. The Murfreesboro Police Department has been called out there a number of times, and Sergeant Tim Higgins, who's here with us today, who is skilled at running the decibel reader, has taken a number of measurements, and over the course of the last year and a half or 2 years has worked with the church on some measures to mitigate the noise impact emanating from the church property. Notably, the church has erected a fence in between this property and the property to the south, and they have eliminated drums from their services. With that being said, they're still exceeding the maximum decibel level during those times. And recently, over the course of the last several months, they've been cited to city court for exceeding those allowable levels. And so they have made requests today to the Board of Zoning Appeals to be able to increase their the decibels that are allowed during the times that you read off, Chairman Rogers. On Saturdays from 11:30 a.m. to 1 p.m., which is their choir rehearsal time, and on Sundays from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. and 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. So just so you know, that's what's been advertised, and if you grant them what they are asking for, those would be the days and times that they would specifically be allowed to exceed the noise ordinance. It would not be a blanket approval. I wanted to read to you an excerpt from Section 21-104 from the Murfreesboro City Code, the section that gives people the ability to make this request to the Board of Zoning Appeals and gives y'all the authority to hear these requests. Section 21-104 deals with the city's regulations with regards to noise. Application for a special permit. Applications for a permit for relief from the noise level designated in this article on the basis of undue hardship may be made to the Board of Zoning Appeals. Any permit granted by the board hereunder shall contain all conditions upon which said permit has been granted and shall specify a reasonable time that the permit shall be effective. The board may grant the relief as applied for if it finds, 1, that additional time is necessary for the applicant to alter or modify activity or operation to comply with this article, or 2, the activity, operation, or noise source will be of temporary duration and cannot be done in a manner that would comply with other subsections of this section, and 3, that no other reasonable alternative is available to the applicant, and 4, the board may prescribe any conditions or requirements it deems necessary to minimize adverse effects upon the community or the surrounding neighborhood. You also notice that in my staff comments, I've included the Table 1 entitled Limiting Noise Levels for Use Districts that provides the maximum decibel levels for residential, commercial, and industrial zoning districts. And one thing that I also neglected to put in my staff comments, but is pertinent because the two of the 3 times that the applicant is requesting relief for is on Sundays, and I put this in front of you and highlighted the applicable section from the City Code. Number 5, if the noise occurs between the hours of 10 p.m. and 7 a.m. on Monday through Saturday, or at any time on Sundays or holidays, 7 shall be subtracted from each of the decibel levels given in Table 1 of subsection 3 of this section. And that's very important to remember because you'll recall their service times are on Sunday, so there's actually more relief required on Sundays because they're only allowed 7 less. They're allowed 7 less decibels than they would be during the rest of the week. And just as a little bit more history, in early 2008, the Murfreesboro Police Department began receiving noise complaints from the church's new next-door neighbor to the south. The decibel readings taken by MPD indicated that the noise level was in excess of that permitted by the city's noise ordinance. MPD met with the church on certain measures to mitigate the noise levels originating on the property, and I mentioned the 2 things that the church has done. Even after these steps had been taken, however, the noise originating from the church was still in excess of the limits allowed by the city code. During the summer of 2009, the church was cited twice by the neighbor for violating the noise ordinance, and the church has made this request in order to avoid being cited in the future. The church took some independent readings, some of which were also exceeding the noise ordinance levels. So we have the readings taken by MPD as well as the readings taken by Mr. Kenneth Stockdale, who the church had retained to take some decibel readings. Mr. Stockdale was supposed to be here today. Unfortunately, he had a scheduling conflict, and he was not able to make it. But his readings have been included as a part of the applicant's submittal package. As I mentioned, Sergeant Higgins from MPD is here today too, and much more knowledgeable about the noise ordinance than I am, and I will defer to him on any questions about the history of this item or technical questions about the readings that he's taken. As noted in the above section of City Code that I've included, the board has the authority to place conditions on the approval of such a permit. For example, the board may wish to condition approval on this item being brought back up for review in a year's time, or the board may wish to place a specific duration on the approval of the special permit, during which time the church would have the opportunity to put additional mitigation measures in place that could reduce the amount of relief needed. And what I'd like to do now is just show some photographs. This is a photograph of the fence that has been erected, and it is on the border, the southern property line that borders the complainant's property. This is the front of the next door neighbor's house to the south. As you can see, his front porch actually faces the church, and his front door actually faces the church. This is taken, of course, directly head-on from Bilbro. This is a photograph of his front porch as it faces the church. and just kind of, once again, shows the relationship of the two properties. And the rest of the photographs are in your package there, just photographs of the surrounding neighborhood. With that being said, I'll be happy to answer any questions to the extent that I can. I may have to defer some of the more technical questions to Sergeant Higgins. Reverend Moses Pope and Deacon Michael Claybrooks are in the audience. They're the applicants. If you have any questions for them as well, either before or after the public hearing.
All right, thank you, Mr. Blomley. Any questions for Mr. Blomley?
I have one, Chairman Rogers. In the ordinance itself, does it dictate the maximum level that this board can approve with respects to raising that decibel level for this variance?
No, sir, not that I'm aware
Okay.
of. Not that I'm aware of. And you'll notice in your materials that the applicant actually asked for 7 decibels above the allowable limit. And what we found was that was not enough to cover some of the readings taken by MPD. So we contacted the applicant and told him that if he made application for that amount, he would be limited, and there would still be the possibility of him being cited. So we suggested that he make application for a number that took into account the readings that MPD took, and 73 decibels was slightly above the maximum readings that were taken by MPD. Knowing that the board can always reduce that amount that's been advertised, he did agree that we could advertise it at 73. But of course, the board cannot increase that amount above and beyond what has been advertised in the legal notice.
Matthew, in the packet, there was, I guess, 3 survey dates and letters accompanying from Stockdale and Associates. I guess some help in interpreting how to read these.
I think I will defer to Sergeant
Pass the
Higgins
baton on that. Okay.
Thank you. I'll try to answer the questions as good as I can, but all of my information will be self-taught. I have no formal training in sound devices or sound waves, but over the last couple of years, I'm basically the only person that can pick the machine up and actually go run it, and that's why I'm here. So your question was?
Well, on the letter from Stockdale and Associates, there's octave band readings from different sites on the property. I didn't know if that equated in decibels. I was just curious what the readings you've seen versus what's been allowed.
The numbers I think you're looking at from Mr. Stockdale indicate that in certain zones of sound, in certain avenues of sounds, there's only so much allowed in that particular zone, and then it moves to the next zone and the limits change. So therefore there's about 8 or 10 wavelengths that we have to deal with. Each of those are limited in the city code. For example, 75 to 100, that decibel should not exceed 60 during the work days and 53 on Sundays, according to city code. If you move on down to the 300 to 600 range, should not exceed 55 during the week and back down to 48 on Sundays. So that's the way you try to read that particular graph.
Sergeant?
Have I lost you?
No, I don't want. If I'm understanding these distances, though, that we're referring to, is that the distance from the source of the noise in a linear, like out from the source? Is that what we're talking about?
The readings that I took, the first time I went over, I went all the way around the city, the church's property, stayed on the outside edge of their property line. And for city code purposes, that's what we normally deal with, is the edge of whatever property the noise is coming from. The last time I wrote a citation, on August the 9th, I made that from Mr. Altman, and he and his wife were here. Mr. Altman's porch. I was actually sitting on the porch taking the readings. Is that your question?
No, it answered another question that I had, but let me go back and try to make sure. So as you explain that to me, then what these numbers, like below 75, 75 to 150, are, I guess, octaves of pitch then? Is that what we're talking about? Low pitch, high pitch? going
In
on?
layman's terms, probably.
Okay.
Having nothing to do with distance.
Correct.
Okay.
On Stockdale's letter here, for instance, the first column, 31.5 hertz, there's a 44 at the front property line. I'm assuming that's 44 decibels in that sound range. Is that how I'm reading that?
I do not have his graph in front of me. All right, could I get you to repeat that?
I'm looking at your, from August 9th, the first box there on the front property line and a 31.5 hertz. You got a 44. I assume that's the decibel level
Yes.
for that reading.
Yes.
So does that fall within the, I'm assuming the 44, trying to break it down in layman's terms, so the
If-
44 falls under the 65,
I've got a,
below the 75. I guess what would he have to be?
All right, that particular one, I do not have that one read off. I think that was 46, 31, below 75. That would be legal. 46 would be legal. Correction, 44 would be legal, I'm sorry. And then if you move up to the 63 hertz, it's still in the below 75
Okay.
range. If you move up to the 125, now you have to move down to the second column, which drops it down to 53 on Sundays.
Okay.
Yeah, that's.
And Mr. Young, one of the things that we did see a difference in the readings that MPD took and that Mr. Stockdale took. So there were some that Sergeant Higgins took that were significantly higher than what were in Mr. Stockdale's reports.
Okay.
What does that mean? You have a different machine than what Stockdale does, or
We actually bought our
the
machine.
same day?
We actually bought our machine using Mr. Stockdale's. He's the one that said you ought to buy this machine right here, and that was back probably 8 or 10 years ago. And that's why we have the machine that we have. And I don't know the model number and all that stuff to it, but anyway, we used. That's the machine that we use. And I would say that the reason that there are differences in his readings and my readings are we weren't there at the same time. He was there in the afternoon or the morning that I wasn't there, and vice versa.
Well, this one says on Sunday, July the 19th, the time selected for measurement to be made were between 10 a.m. and 11 a.m. This particular one, and
Right. I took readings probably on 8 or 10 different days.
Just curious, were you called out there 8 or 10 different times?
Yes, sir.
So, okay.
I have built a rapport with the complainants during the last couple of years over this.
Is it, what's going on? Is it just the bands playing inside the church, I guess, and it's just emanating from inside the church, outside the church?
What I believe is going on, this is an old building that doesn't have insulation on the outside walls. And the way that Mr. Altman's porch is designed, it kind of creates a funnel that sound bounces right into. And you can hear from inside his house, you can hear what's going on over inside the church building. If you're sitting on his porch, you can definitely hear what's going on. And a lot of times you can even make out the words that are being said. But it's a design that nobody anticipated, I suppose.
Sergeant, have you taken any readings this year?
Yes, sir. probably 5 or 6 different times, 7 or 8 different times. The last citation that I wrote came from August the 9th. The readings that I took that day are 67.1 decibels, 67.8 decibels, 70.6 decibels, 70.5, and 70.9 decibels. That's why they came up with the number 73, is because it kind of took care of all those.
If I understand right, when you're quoting the decibels there, you're talking about one band of sound?
One band of sound.
Which one are you?
The machine that I use gives you all the bands across a graph, and then it kind of gives you that one band that you can kind of go by, and that one would be the below 75 band. And that one should be a 58 on Sundays. And like I said, most of mine were in the 67 up through 70.9 range.
And that was a Sunday morning?
Yes, sir. That's the shift I work, and that's why I'm normally over there on Sunday mornings.
I guess just curious in trying to glance at the readings from the Stockdale letters versus the requirements. I don't see any that were, there's borderline right there at the level, the Sunday levels. And
He sent
interpret that.
He sent us a letter that he took readings on August the 2nd from 10 to 11, and you're looking at the one from July the 19th, I'm thinking. Is that correct?
Okay. I was, yeah.
The August the 2nd reading, and I'll be glad to share that with y'all, has got 4 on that particular graph that are what you'd call in violation.
Okay.
And 2 of which, 3 of which actually match the maximum.
Okay.
And I'll be glad to share a copy of that with you.
I kind of see where you are now. I guess the middle,
August the
We've got
2nd.
the 2nd and the 9th.
We got that, too.
I guess at the middle property line, you know, I'm saying the 31, the 63, the 125 are all dealing with a 58 maximum for that day. Am I approaching that right? 65 minus the 7. So the 58 is the maximum they could hit for that?
Yes,
Am I interpreting that correctly?
that's the way I understand it.
Okay.
Where is it? I don't see it.
Yeah, I don't see the,
The highest I see on here is 54.
the 1,000. The 1,000 range is over. The middle property line there, the 43 at the back. When you get down out here, then you're working with these lower numbers. When you hit the 40s out here. Okay. I think I'm learning about audiology.
All right, any other questions for Sergeant Higgins? All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
At this time, Reverend Pope or Mr. Claybrooks, anything you all would like to add to the application?
Good afternoon. Name Deacon Michael Claybrooks. Only thing I'd just like to add, we're trying to establish some type of peaceful resolution with the community and also with our neighbors. I've been in this church for over 2 years, and during those times I have been with the church, we never really had much complaint until lately. And the reason why we actually request this appeal is actually to mitigate this so that we cannot have any more of this in the future. We're not actually establishing this noise intentionally because I feel that, being with the church, it's our right to worship. And I understand that the church is in a residential area, and we pay their regards to our neighbors in that regard that we are in a residential area. I also like to comment also on the decibel reading that I received from Mr. Stockdale, even though he's not here. Some of those readings were actually done on consecutive Sundays, And I actually request that he actually come in and do the readings during the time when no one actually aware that he's around, so he can take those noise levels without them actually try to mitigate the noise or try to reduce the noise they actually have from the church. Right now, the pastor pretty much has mitigated all his efforts to try to mitigate the noise level. He took away the drums. He also erected the fence there around the property. And we also we don't have actually a band. The type of music that we actually have inside the church is from a CD player that we actually use for the music, and the choir actually sing around those music. And like as I was stating, Mr. Stockdale, from the time he took those noise levels, actually one time during the morning service, and that was during the time that I specified on the request, and also during the afternoons when we actually have our evening service. And based off those readings and the way he explained to me that we were pretty much in compliance with those noise levels. So.
Hang on a second. I've got
Mr. Claybrooks, if you could come back, and we've got a couple questions for you, I think.
Mr. Claybrooks. Has Mr. Stockdale, have you visited with him about any other mitigation efforts that you could make? I know that the ones you have made is remove the drums and the fence. Is he suggested to you any other methods of mitigation of the noise that you could take, either inside or outside the building?
Well, there was one that he recommended, and I know it financially, it would cause hardship upon the church, and it was just he made one recommendation, and it was just something that he requested. I mean, well, not requested, but he recommended was a concrete barrier. But I know that may be a little bit more impossible for us to actually erect one around the wall of the church there.
A concrete wall?
Right, a barrier.
Is there any soundproofing or anything on the walls inside the church?
I'm not aware of that information.
That's all I have.
All right, thank you, Mr. Claybrooks. Reverend Pope, anything you'd like to add?
I would like to add that we had that church remodeled back here a while back, and we had those walls insulated. And we don't have no piano player either. The only thing we have that little bit of music. But I done all I could do. I mean, I done everything I could do. It might be coming through the windows. I don't know. But standing on the outside and hear everything I say on the inside, that's a little much.
Any questions for Reverend Pope?
So you're saying that you don't even have a piano player?
No, ma'am.
Nothing like that?
No, ma'am.
And no drums?
No drum. I spent $500 to put that cage around the drums, and it still didn't do too much good. And then we put a block in the drum and covered it where that foot thing wouldn't keep too much noise. I did everything, and still it's too much. I don't have no drum at all now. No drum, no guitars, anything like that. Just a little on a tape.
All right, thank you, Reverend Pope. All right, at this time, we'll go ahead and conduct a public hearing. Anyone present wishing to speak for or against the application, if you would please come forward, state your name, address, and any comments that you might have.
Chairman Rogers, members of the council, my name is James Altman. I am the neighbor. I live at 211 South Bilbro. I actually have some lovely charts here if you would like to look at them. The thing about decibels is at every 10 dB, sound doubles. So they're asking for about a 15 dB margin. So you're looking at about 3 times the legal limit. when it comes to decibels. The lower the numbers, when you were talking about the frequencies earlier, 60 to 70, all that is all your bass, it's all your thump. If they're using a CD, they can turn it down. I've never once asked them to do anything against the church. I respect what they do. You know, it's, if you look on it, I'd be happy to give you this chart. At about 75 dB, you're looking at a unsilenced wood chipper from 30 feet. So basically, it's like having that sit at your property line and just go. If you've ever sat at a street light and you've had one of those little base cars come up behind you and you're listening to the thump, that's how it is in my house. You know, I mean, it's loud. If they have the ability to turn the volume down, like the last time we went to court, it was about 3 weeks ago, and since then we've actually been great because they knew this meeting was coming up. So the volume's been completely bearable. It's been completely acceptable. I mean, it actually may be a little more than the legal limit, but it's been very good. If you give them this variance, 75 or 73 dB is really loud. It's just, if this was a bar, if this was, your neighbor playing your rock band or doing like this would never have gotten this far. Like I said, I respect what they do, and all I ask is that you keep and enforce what the law says so that, they can keep it down. I mean, they can continue to do what they do. They just turn the volume down. That's it.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Altman. Any questions for Mr. Altman?
How long have you lived here, Mr. Altman?
2 years, a little over.
And did you buy that property then, or have you?
Yes, I purchased the home.
2 years ago.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Those are easy questions, weren't they? All right. Anyone else present wishing to speak for or against this application? Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Kendall Rasmussen. I live at 211 South Bilbro. Kind of have a prepared statement because I get a little nervous. Our founding fathers set up this country with the intent on keeping the church and state separate. While the church has every right to practice their religion how they see fit, it also must follow the laws like everybody else. What precedent would you be setting if you grant this waiver? That if any religious institution doesn't want to follow law, all it must do is ask for a waiver? What if a mosque were asking to play their prayers over a loudspeaker because the Quran tells them to? Let's forget the fact that we're dealing with a church. If this were a homeowner, would this even be a consideration? There are 2 other bands who practice in our neighborhood. Will they be able to get the waiver too? The laws in the city should not discriminate. If I cannot break the law, neither can they. We have been very patient, not going to civil court to sue for damages, not going to the press, or getting a constitutional lawyer. All we want to do is live our quiet life, to not be bothered and not bother anyone else. We would like the church to explore insulation ideas, seeing as though they told my mother that there was no insulation on our side of the church. If the pastor can afford a Cadillac Escalade, he can certainly afford to get some insulation batting and maybe a couple of windows. They are breaking the law, and so instead of making an exception to the law, they should mitigate their actions.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Rasmussen. Rasmussen, right?
Rasmussen.
Rasmussen.
Yes.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Rasmussen?
Where do you live, ma'am?
211 South Bilbro.
Help me out in relationship to the church. So is it across the street? Or?
It's right next door. It's about 50 feet away.
So you live in the gray home with the gentleman that
Yes.
spoke?
Yes,
before
we're
you?
married.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else?
Hi, good afternoon. I live at 3256 Perlino Drive, Murfreesboro, Tennessee. I purchased a house also 3 years ago.
Can you state your name for us?
Jacqueline Clay Brooks.
Say your last name.
Clay Brooks.
Clay Brooks. Thank you.
I purchased a house also 3 years ago. And what I did, I researched my neighborhood. I live by 2 elementary schools. I live a block and a half from Scales Elementary School. I can go out of my house in the afternoon and I hear children playing. It's loud. It's not right next door. So do I call the police and make a complaint about that? Or do you know your surroundings ahead of time? Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Claybrooks. Any questions for Ms. Claybrooks? Anyone else wishing to speak for or against this application? All right, going once, going twice. All right, we will declare the public hearing closed and open the floor for any further discussion or motion.
So, Mr. Blomley, is the application, as you understand it, a request for the 73 decibel reading at any of these bandwidths, or are we going down commensurate with how they stair step, or are we just talking about this lowest bandwidth on the 73?
I believe we would be talking across the board. Mr. Ives, would you agree with that?
It was my understanding that this request was just for a blanket no 73 maximum, so nothing over 73 in any category.
Y'all help me understand. I'm kind of with Davis here. I was trying to listen, understand. On Mr. Stockdale's readings from July 19th, August 2, and August 9, 58 is the magic number because we're looking at Sundays.
I didn't see any
I'm not
reading.
seeing 58.
Well,
I didn't see any reading on Stockdale's reports that indicated that they were over.
And I believe on the one from July 19th, and I'm trying to remember based on my review of these, as Mr. Claybrooks was bringing these in as Mr. Stockdale did them. And if I recall correctly, the one that was done on July 19th, I believe was in compliance with. I don't believe there are any readings that exceeded it on July 19th. Mr. Claybrooks can verify this to be true. I believe he told me that was because it was a different choir that was not as loud as their main choir. Is that correct, Mr. Claybrooks?
That's correct.
Okay. So the readings from the 2 Sundays in August, and in case the microphones didn't pick that up, Mr. Claybrooks acknowledged in the affirmative. But that the two readings that Mr. Stockdale did on August 2nd and August 9th had some readings, as Sergeant Higgins noted, that were greater than, because I believe it was a different choir that was operating on those 2 Sundays.
That's what I'm missing. Is where I'm looking for 58, anything greater than 58, and
I think, well, the way I interpret it as this scale drops as you get different bandwidth. So on the August 2nd reading, the second measurement, there's a 54 in the 125, where it was on the taking 7 from the 60, you hit the 53. Then on over at the 1,000, the maximum was 38, and there was a 43 at the front property line. So there were a couple of spots that were, given that current setup on that day, that hit the maximum as you move out. Or on the chart, 38 was the max out here at the 2,000, and there was one matched the maximum for that day, and the 2 others locations on the lot exceeded that.
That sliding scale, is that what the ordinance says, or is that?
Yeah, what the table 1 that I've got in my staff comments is taken directly from City Code, and then of course that's supplemented with. Item number 5 that I've highlighted, which says that on Sundays, the acceptable level is, at these octave bands, is this number minus 7. So whereas below 75 octave band, normally it would be 65, it would be 58 on Sundays.
Okay.
In the 75 to 150 range, normally it would be 60, but it would be 53 on Sundays.
Okay.
And I guess Adam's question is a good one now, but we're what they're requesting is the 73 at all of these, even though it'd be, 38, 37, 38 decibels over what's currently in the ordinance.
It was a difficult request to frame the exact request. Originally, their request was just for 7 above. And certainly, you can modify what we've advertised. I think what we did in advertising the request was to kind of over-advertise or advertise at the maximum that we thought, would be needed without getting too complex in the advertisement to where it wouldn't be understandable or it would be, a whole page-long advertisement. But when we advertise at that top level, you can always scale that back. But if we advertise too low, then we could end up being here in the same place in a few months if the church is granted a approval that's less than what they actually need. It would kind of defeat the purpose of them coming here. So we put that 73 there in an overabundance of caution.
That's a great question, though. But if you put 73 in the 2,300 to 4,800 range, it's probably going to sound like a jet taking off. If they're allowed to go up to 73 in the 23 to 4,800 range, so I don't think that was the intent at all of the application. There would necessarily have to be some finding by the board if the application is granted that there's some sort of sliding scale through the what is it? Is it bandwidth? Octave range, octave bands.
Question: Does anybody else have a noise exemption, noise ordinance exemption? Is this the first?
Well, we have actually closed the public hearing. If there's some comments that you would like to make concerning this application, we could, I suppose, reopen the public hearing for the limited purpose of hearing comments that you'd like to make. Do you want to make some comments about this application?
Well, I just work for a phone company, so I know a lot about DVs.
Okay.
But,
Well, let me get you. We'll go ahead and reopen the public. We'll go ahead and reopen the public hearing. And if I could get you to.
This one levels of noise. I didn't bring too many. I'm sorry.
Sir, if you want to go to the podium, I'll hand those out for you.
I mean, DVs or something other than basic.
If I can get you to go ahead and go to the podium, sir, let me stop you for just a second, okay? What I need you to do is I need you to tell us who you are, where you live, and any comments that you might have, okay?
Okay, my name is Dave Altman. I am James's father. I live in Murfreesboro. I live on Independence Way, and of course, we're obviously interested in it. He, complains about headaches and all kinds of things on Sunday mornings. And I've been over to his house, and it's loud. And like the officer said, they take the noise measurements not at the property line, but on the front porch, which is about 30 feet, about 40 feet probably, inside the property line. And it's been an interesting going-on situation. But basically, let me give you a basic introduction on sound levels and frequencies and stuff. Children, small kids and stuff talk in really high frequencies. Their normal voice range is the 300 to 3,000 cycle range. So when we're talking about the drums, they're below 600. They're typically in the 30 to 100 cycle or so range. When somebody in a car with a speaker system in it pulls up next to you and your car is shaking, that's because the drums and the speakers in there are pounding away. But it tends to be sub-audible sounds. And that's really what it's been. Like you said, whatever they've done the last 3 weeks, it's been great. I mean, it's been not been an issue at all. It's when it gets really loud that it's just overwhelming. And I think if this is the first one that goes up to 75 dB. 75 dB, I think if you look on there, it said 75 dB is equivalent to a wood chipper running at 10 meters at 30 feet. I don't know about you, but wood chippers I know are pretty loud. I'm trying to bring some clarity to this thing here because this can be a real interesting subject. Males, for instance, talk in the typically 300 to 700 cycle range. Women have much higher frequencies. They talk typically in the 1700 to 1900 or so. As you get older, your octaves go up. You can talk, some women, your mother, for instance, probably talks up in the 2500 cycle range. And that's where the frequency thing is coming in from. Violins are probably one of the highest instruments out there. They're in really high frequency ranges. Drums, on the other hand, are the lowest. Bass guitars are one of the lowest. And I hope this thing kind of clears up some separation here. It's 70 dB is 75 to 73 dB is a lot of volume.
All right, thank you, Mr. Altman. Any questions for Mr. Altman? All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Okay, is there anyone, given those comments, anyone else that wishes to speak? Let me see, Ms. Rasmussen, before you speak, let me see if there's anybody else that wanted to add anything new, any new speakers. Okay.
The only other thing I have to say is MPD sound readings, in my opinion, are impartial. We've never met him before we started having this problem, and the only time we've had any contact with him is when he comes over to take the readings. On their side, they paid an audiologist to come take readings. It's not an impartial reading, and for all we know, they could have told him when to come over and take readings, which would be completely different on the same day than MPD's readings. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Well, I kind of wish Mr. Stockdale was here.
Yeah, I'm
just so confused at how the readings are so different.
Well, I guess we need
I just
to.
wished he would have come,
If you mind.
so we could have questioned him.
In regard to what you just stated about we could have told Mr. Stockdale had been in the business for over 30 years. And he worked for Chief Crispin here at the Murfreesboro Police Department. Now, I went to Mr. Stockdale, and I asked Mr. Stockdale would he come on Sundays, just meet with me on Sundays. The church didn't know anything about him being there or whatever to make these sound readings. And that's to answer your question, is what we could have done. Now, I know for my fact about myself, I wouldn't tell him to modify himself, because that's the way I am. Because I won't get all this stuff behind and try to clear all this stuff up. But to answer the question is, Mr. Stockdale come out and on Sundays, and I would meet with him and let him know. And there was nothing else modified as far as the sound inside the church.
Since Mr. Claybrooks has come back up, I do have a question. It sounds like that in the last 3 weeks that the neighbor is satisfied with the decibel level. What is different that's going on in the last 3 weeks that
Nothing's different. Everything is still the same as it normally been. Everything is still business as usual. I don't see anything different. The way that we have a sound system inside the church with a CD player there to play the music, and the music is the same as it always have been.
Well, have you just got rid of the drums in the last 3 weeks or what?
No, the drum's been gone for over a year. It's been a while. It's been close to a year. Over a year. And matter of fact, right after we got rid of the drums, we went ahead and wrecked the fence up on the other side of the church.
And what kind of sound system is this? I get a sense this is not just a CD player.
The same system we have since I've been there. The only difference is we have a what we call a normal boom box with the CD player, and we used to have it with the boom box, and now we does it with a computer now, and they have the CD actually is formatted with the computer and to actually play the music with to the sound system, and that's the only difference that I could see with the sound of the music.
But I assume the sound system that we're talking about is not just the computer. It's something that goes into an amplifier and through
right.
speakers.
It goes to we have a loudspeaker system inside the church, okay. But we only for as long as I've known right now, I've seen that we have speakers in the front and back of the church, and we use the one speaker system.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Claiborne. All right, anyone else wishes to speak?
I'd like to make one more now.
Yes, sir.
That PA system we have, it really, it's no count. I can stand right here and you hear everything I say, but mine, I got to get right up in it. And I know it's not real loud. I need a better PA system. And by being not no count, then the lady told me what kind of car I drive. I'm a minister. God take care of me. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Reverend Pope. Okay, anyone else present wishing to speak for or against this application? All right, then we'll declare the public hearing again closed and reopen the floor for any further discussions or a motion.
Well, I'm going back to what Ms. Mosby said, Mr. Chairman. I mean, you know, we've got Sergeant Higgins here, who's admittedly in a bad spot. He has taken some readings that he says are over. We've got, who I guess is the expert on this, Mr. Stockdale, who's not here, but has given us a table of readings over 3 different days. As I look at them, I'll correct my earlier statement. I've since went back and looked at each line, and I find 3 readings that appear to be over based on how I understand this table works, which could be completely wrong. But as I interpret the information that we've been provided, it seems difficult for us. And then we're added with the, to me, a complicating factor of this blanket 73 decibels, and what would, if we agree to some maximum limit, how does that translate into a step down in the different frequencies? And we don't really have, seems to me, the person here that we need to answer the questions for us. It's kind of hard for us to make a decision, not being experts in this field, without some additional information. That's just kind of where I'm at. I mean, if you just look at Mr. Stockdale's reports, it seems like they're in compliance except for a couple of levels, and wouldn't need a 73 if these readings are accurate. I mean, I guess that's kind of where I'm at. If these readings are accurate, then they're not in violation. Of course, MPD is saying that they are, and then we've got this sort of juxtaposition that, you know, we're kind of left to decide who knows better about how to operate the machine or not.
I was kind of heading down that same road when I was asking about Mr. Stockdale's findings, but then I got to thinking, well, is that really relevant? Because they are asking for a level at 73 decibels that is admittedly in excess of what they are allowed by ordinance. So whether or not they're over now, I'm not sure I see the relevance in that. I think they're wanting to be over, but by permit. And so the question then for me becomes is that okay with me, and if they want to be up to that level? I think still the issue still lies there, and that is, you know, the sliding scale. But I was kind of wrestling with that too, but then I derailed from that, thinking, well, I don't know, even if they are over that, according to Stockdale or not, they're asking to be over. So I'm sorry, I just got through that out. But
in looking at this excerpt from the code, the board may grant relief as it applied if the noise source will be of temporary duration. I'm trying to boil it down to something simple. I don't know that it's, on one hand, it looks like they're close to what they need on Mr. Stockdale's, but I'm strongly giving them permanent. Can we just give them permanent right to be over the decibel level? That's kind of what I'm looking at this point.
I actually would like to maybe see the MPD and Mr. Stockdale get together and go out there at the same time. And I mean, Ms. Stockdale supposedly is an expert from, from everything I've read. But if y'all could go out there together, please, and come up with some reading, and, maybe we could act on it. But it's hard for me to act on something when I got that much difference, I don't.
Well, I believe that Mr. Stockdale and Sergeant Higgins have met and discussed this. I don't know that they've made readings together, but I believe Sergeant Higgins has discussed his findings with Mr. Stockdale. Is that correct, Sergeant Higgins? Yes, it is.
I think, Chairman, your point's well taken, whether they are or they're not. I see that logic, too. I guess I'm in the mode, and I think maybe Ms. Mosby's with me, that I think they're here to try to craft some solution, and then if the readings are disparate between Mr. Stockdale and MPD, I don't know that anything we do here today, I guess we're being asked to make MPD happy with it based on their readings is really what we're being asked to do, to try to cause. I'd like to find something that could have peace between these neighbors, but I'm just not sure. It's not jumping out at me exactly what that's going to be today based on what we've got with us in front of us. I guess that's where I was trying to find something that would allow us to make some ruling that would make them happy. But it seems to me the difference is their guy's telling them they're okay, and MPD is saying they're not. I don't know that there's anything we're going to do except give them a blanket noise exemption that's going to solve that issue.
Well, and just to bring up this point is that, and Mr. Claybrooks can speak to this, is that when I first looked at that at the first reading from July 19th that Mr. Stockdale did, and I analyzed it and I sent it along to Chief Chrisman, as well as our legal department, to look at it, and observed that there was very little, if any, increase above the maximum allowable limits. And so then that's why I asked Mr. Claybrooks to have some additional readings taken so that we could determine whether or not there was a trend. And it turns out that it was good that we did, because it was a different choir. But I think that regardless of how much Mr. Stockdale's readings may differ from MPD's readings, I think the church wanted to pursue this, even if Mr. Stockdale's readings were only slightly above the allowable limit, because I think their goal was to move forward, push forward, and see if they could be granted this relief, because their goal was to be able to have their services and choir rehearsals and not have to worry about being cited back to city court. And I think so that's even when advised that their readings were barely above the limits allowed in the city code, they did want to still move forward. And I'd ask Mr. Claybrooks if that's an accurate characterization of the conversations that we've had. Is that accurate, Mr. Claybrooks?
Yes, that's accurate. Chairman Rogers, if I may, I don't think it's my place to advocate, and I'm certainly not advocating for any relief or any specific relief. But as it seems to me, we do have a sliding scale from our ordinance on the decibel levels, and I think that as one man said, that certain frequencies are maybe more irritating, maybe, more bothersome than other frequencies, and that would, while I don't pretend to be a sound engineer or audiologist, that does make some sense to me. I know that some noises are more irritating to me, at least, than others. If the board is of a mind to make any adjustment at this time, I would recommend that we look at the scale, at the weekend scale, and go +1, +2, +5, +10, I don't know, whatever number there, if there's, yeah. Again, and I'm not advocating for anything or advocating that you do nothing, but if the board's of a mind to do something, then to take the existing scale and make an addition to it of up to, certainly no more than the highest number being 73, because that's what was asked for. But whatever number, if any, is added to the existing, then just add it to each category in the existing scale. Does that make sense?
I have a question for you, Mr. Ives, though. If they're cited, even if we approve this and they're cited for going above that limit again, is in city court, is it only going to be used that the MPD reading is what is admissible in court?
Well, I would assume the MPD reading is all that's going to be brought to court, unless there is another person taking a test at the same time.
Okay.
Because
we'll go back to Mrs. Mosby's point, but
right.
Okay.
Right. So, I mean, what it was last week is irrelevant if MPD takes a reading this coming week and any of the categories are above, then there is a basis to go to city court. And whether you use a maximum of, 1 more than is currently allowed or 20 more than is currently allowed, if any of the numbers are above that, then either the neighbor is going to be within his rights to ask for a citation be issued. And this is one of those things you can't. I don't think we can get an instant replay on this to come back and get a second opinion. It'll be to draw the analogy with the car coming beside you, which I'm sure all of you have had. There's no opportunity to have someone come test the sound. It's either there at the time or it's not, and 5 minutes could be pretty annoying, and then it's not to that level again. I don't have a solution to suggest to you. I wish I did, but I certainly don't. But I do think that if you're of a mind to make some adjustment here, that just a plus a certain number added to all the existing scale would be the appropriate way to go.
How does a 70 sound? That's just 3 points different.
I would have to defer to the scale that he brought, Mr. Altman brought. I'd be calling the police too. And I totally agree with what he just said about placing a number along with the numbers that are already there. If you want to add 8, or for instance, if you want to add 8 on Sunday morning to this particular building, that would be a proposal or whatever you come up with.
Sergeant Higgins, can I get you, if your statement's going to be more than just a few seconds, if you could come to the podium, because they can't pick it up. They can't pick it up when you're over there and see. That's right.
I agree with what he said a minute ago. Attach a number to the graph that's already there in city code, and decide on that. They're asking basically for an increase of 8 for what's legal during the week. Is the way I'm thinking he's talking about, instead of a subtraction of 7 like the rest of the city has to do on Sunday mornings. And you're asking what a 70 was like, which would be an increase of 5. I'd be calling the police too.
But that would be an increase of 12 on Sundays, correct? Because since
right, increase
correct.
Of 5 from
Yes.
what it would be on the weekday, and I guess our city council has made the determination some time back that evenings from 10 a.m. to 7 a.m. and on Sundays and holidays, it should be a little quieter, in residential neighborhoods at least. And this board has the power to grant some exceptions to that. And again, I'm not trying to advocate for or against, but the decision to lower the volume on Sundays, I guess, is to some extent an attempt to balance. And it wasn't that many, I don't know when this was last amended or adopted, but it wasn't that many years ago that there were virtually no retail stores open on Sundays. There really wasn't anything to do. In many respects, today, Sunday is a lifestyle day, not that much different than any other day. And I don't say that to degrade anything, anyone's belief or anyone's practices. It's just that as a practical matter in the community, with the businesses that are many open and stores that are open, it is to some extent just another day. So times have changed since, over the last years, and whether this board wants to reflect that in at this, or also, I guess an option is to wait for further information and ask for another person who, and I guess it would be Mr. Stockdale, to come in and explain his charts more and have some further discussion from them on what numbers, what these really do mean.
And this motion or the application is to get to 73. That's the highest number in any of these levels. Is that right? Yes.
Yes.
The policeman is saying, give me a no. I guess I'm wondering, is there some compromise in this number that we're approaching? Is there?
According to the paperwork that was filed today, the application, yes. According to the proposal that you set forth just a minute ago, and the original proposal that I just saw over here, they want to add 7 or 8 to the numbers that are already there.
I was thinking when that question first came up that a sliding scale made the most sense, so I was thinking of...
Yes, that makes the most sense by far.
Okay.
Now, I'm confused again because I believe that that I heard someone say that the highest reading you had was 70.9.
Yes, in that particular range.
In that range.
In that particular...
So actually, they're only asking 3 above your reading. Not quite that.
Yes, ma'am. Above my reading,
They're
yes.
above your reading.
Which that would be 8 points.
From the cities.
Exactly. In that bandwidth, yes. You're wanting to increase it by 8.
Actually, on Sunday mornings, that would be an increase.
12, 8 plus the 7 that should be subtracted. So now you're talking about 15 points on that particular. That's the proposal.
And the one gentleman said that 10 decibels is doubling. Yes. So if they're asking to request that, or at the highest test he had was 15, then that's, what, 2.5 times the limit, the current limit?
Well, I think that's the point, though. I mean, with all due respect to those who are speaking, I mean, no, I don't expect that y'all are experts in the field. You're obviously got a position to advocate, and so I hear you saying that, but apparently Mr. Stockdale's the expert, and we're being asked to triple numbers and read charts and graphs that's pulled off the internet, and they may be very true or they may not. I guess I'm just saying we're being asked to rely on things that people are admitting to us that they're not exactly experts in. The experts' numbers tells us that they're in compliance, pretty much, except for a couple of a range and 3 days of readings, which brings me around to kind of where the chairman goes, and I don't know if any of this has anything to do with anything, because they're asking for it to be okay for them to be louder than they're allowed to. But their own guys telling us that they aren't even as loud as they're allowed to be right now, or right at the margins of it. And the standard is that the regulations, as they exist, place an undue hardship on the applicant. Well, their guy's telling us that they're meeting the requirements. So really, what we've got is a battle of the experts' readings and MPD's readings, in my mind. And the applicant is saying, we're in compliance right now, but we want to get higher, is really what they're saying to us based on these documents. So, you know, that's the problem. I don't know that they have an undue hardship if we believe what their expert tells us, that they're already in compliance. So really what they've got is a bone to pick with MPD and their readings. It seems to me.
But it may not be a decision or even a consideration of this board, but if they go to court and the only thing that's going to matter is an MPD reading, then what I can't figure out what's been accomplished.
That's, yeah.
Either way, these people leave here. I don't disagree with what you're saying at all. I'm not sure, based upon the draft of what's being requested, that we can actually, in my opinion, approve it. But when we deny it, if we were to deny it, I'm not sure that 2 weeks from now or 3 weeks from now that there's a remedy to the solution. And I guess you could say that's not our problem, but
that's kind of where I'm at. I'd like to craft something, but I just don't think we're in a
Right.
position to do it. I mean, I agree with you. If we stick to the burden and we deny it, they're going to be back in court, and neither one of them are going to be helped. And we've all been through this exercise and we've
Correct.
not accomplished anything.
That's correct.
And if we have it within our power, I would like to, but I just don't. I'm not finding it. Sergeant Higgins, can I ask you a question? And please don't misunderstand me. I think in your initial remarks you admitted, I know you're in a tough spot. I know you. I've seen you in court. I have a lot of respect for you. Not being the expert, but kind of being the guy that gets, I don't know if stuck is a fair word, but you get the machine and they send you out there. Here you go, Sergeant. Do you know? You said that this machine that you bought was the one that Mr. Stockdale recommended 7 or 8 years ago. Has it been calibrated in the last 8 years?
It has a calibration machine in the case. So before
you test it and then you use it.
Before you actually take it out in the field and use it for court purposes, you should calibrate it. Yes.
Have you had it in? Is there a method or process that all that is checked by some outside expert to make sure it's working properly or anything like that?
The calibration machine that comes with it, you just plug it on the end, turn it on, and it gives you that reading, and it calibrates itself. So the machine that I use, to the best of my knowledge, I'm the only person that's picked it up in probably the last 8 years, and I know that it hasn't been dropped, and I have no reason to believe that anything is wrong with it.
But you haven't had, for example, Mr. Stockdale or someone else test it against equipment he's using to verify what the accuracy is?
I'd be glad to let him do that, but I haven't.
I'm just asking. And I also wanted to go on the other side of it. I mean, you've noted that you've been there in person when these are going on, and you would, just on a personal level, as far as your own witness, would find it offensive. But as far as the readings, I guess, because we're being really asked to look at decibel readings as opposed to what we hear, but you're acknowledging that there's some valid complaints here, I guess, based on what you've observed when you've been there.
I think that there's a happy medium ground. If the board would say, put up a barrier and we'll do this. I don't know, but I know that there is both parties want the same thing.
Yeah.
It's just
That's the other thing that I would hope Stockdale, and that's why I'd ask the applicant. I mean,
Mr. Stockdale proposed
some sort, besides a concrete wall, surely there's some padding or some, they soundproof rooms or some sort of material that could cover an internal wall to help that noise level, but without, there again, without the expert here, I don't know that we're in good hands of putting certain restrictions on. Concrete wall seems a bit extreme to me, but, I guess I'm just grasping, but and like I said, I just wanted to get your thoughts on the reading and the machine and all that, because clearly, if you look at this and look at what you're telling us, y'all are pretty far off on these decibel readings.
Well, but again, I'd remind the board that they were taken at different times. I don't believe that Sergeant Higgins was out there doing readings on the same days that Mr. Stockdale did. So the readings are not, obviously the reports are inconsistent, but that's not any indication, I don't think, that either one of them is inaccurate, because they were different days. And I guess it's like many other activities, on different days, some days they're louder than on other days.
It seems odd to me, though, that you got 3 different days and times and more than that, I guess, from the sergeant, and his are consistently high and his are consistently within. I mean, I hear what you're saying, but still, if we just had one reading in a snippet, I would tend to believe that more, kind of go that way. And it's still true, could possibly be true, but 3 different days, his is consistently below, and Sergeant Higgins is consistently higher. I don't know how to...
Okay, I think we're kind of starting to spin some wheels here. I'll just go back and remind the board that we're, as much as we'd like to solve this problem for them, I'm not sure we're a forum to mediate a dispute. They simply come to us asking for this application, and our job is to say yes or no as to whether or not they're entitled to a special permit for relief above the noise ordinance for a maximum noise level of 73 decibels from certain days and times. I think that's the issue that's at hand.
Mr. Chairman, I guess I'll make the motion since I made the most noise here, and I don't know where everybody else is, but obviously we need to move the application along. As much as I would like to be able to echo the thoughts of the chairman to mediate or find some basis here, I just go back to the standard of undue hardship on the applicant, and the applicant's proof is that they're not in violation of the noise ordinance, and these were taken at random times by their own expert, and I just don't know that there's a showing of undue hardship on them, so I'm going to vote to deny the application.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Yeah, to that, I'll add these comments that the applicant, I believe, has the burden, and the board may grant relief only if certain circumstances exist. I think Davis Young hit on it earlier, the issue of the temporary nature of this. This is not, in my understanding, something that is a temporary, this is going to continue in perpetuity. While it's temporary during the day, it only exists during certain hours, this is actually going to be a permanent condition. So I don't see that this is an activity or operation or noise source that will be of temporary duration. Also, it does not appear that the applicant is making efforts to alter or modify the activity or operation to come into compliance, and that's something that we're allowed to grant, essentially a temporary permit to allow additional time for the applicant to alter or modify the activity, but there's no indication that that effort's being made. Also, we have to find that there's no other reasonable alternative available to the applicant. And certainly, I think that there is a reasonable alternative in that we can operate below 73 decibels, have done that successfully, according to Mr. Stockdale, according to the MPD, and even over the last 3 weeks, according to Mr. Altman and Ms. Rasmussen. So I don't think that a permit to operate up to 73 decibels is necessary, that there exists a reasonable alternative available, and as it's been shown. So those are my comments in support, I guess, of the motion. All right. Any other comments?
I'm just, the last 3 weeks, things have apparently been going well. I don't suppose the officer there has been out there in the last 3 weeks to get a reading. It's just kind of hard to determine what to do in this case for me.
All right. We're ready to vote. Any other comments? All right. This concerns the motion. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Nay.
Okay. Any opposed? We have 4 in favor, 1 opposed. All right. Reverend Pope, that your application has been denied. We do appreciate you all coming in, though. Also, Mr. Altman, Ms. Rasmussen, Mr. Altman, appreciate y'all's comments today, too. All right. We'll continue on with the agenda. Staff reports and other business. I actually have a report, and I don't know if they're pleased, but I certainly am pleased to report that Ms. Frances Mosby and Mr. Adam Dodd have been reappointed for new terms on the Board of Zoning Appeals, new 3-year terms. And so, again, we are very much appreciative. That was an appointment made by the City Council. They have done, by all accounts, an outstanding job on the Board of Zoning Appeals, and we certainly are glad to have them continue to serve with us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Next item under staff reports and other business, consider for approval of the proposed 2010 BZA calendar.
Thank you, Chairman Rogers. And I'll second what you said just a moment ago, too. We're certainly, as staff, proud to have Ms. Mosby and Mr. Dodd on board, as we are all of y'all. What you have in your packages is this pretty calendar that Ms. Davis put together for you. Nice green color there. It's the proposed Murfreesboro Board of Zoning Appeals submittal dates and deadlines and meeting dates. This falls in line with the Planning Commission meeting dates and deadlines. Typically, I bring this before you every year after the Planning Commission approves their calendar. They did so at their last meeting, and so now if you don't find any issues with the scheduling of this calendar, it's basically in the same format as this year's calendar. I'd like a motion to approve it if the board sees fit.
The only thing that, Mr. Blomley, that I asked, the only thing that I've found is that the March meeting is during spring break for the school system. I don't know if we typically try to move that for applicants or for board members, or if that gets too difficult a situation, but I know that's a time that a lot of people travel out of town. It's the counties. That's the week of spring break this year, as I understand it. So I don't know what anybody else's thoughts are on that, but that'd be something that I thought we would at least talk about or consider.
We let's see what
It's March.
we do have 5 Wednesdays in March. We could make that the 31st if that is better for the board members.
I don't
Sounds
want,
great to me.
I just, I know that a lot of times.
We usually
either-
travel during that.
Yeah,
Same.
board members will travel. We typically do that in spring, and then applicants may as well, so I just thought that was worth bringing up.
As I do not have kids, that is something that I did not think of. So I'm glad you thought of that, and that actually works out pretty good because we do have an extra Wednesday in March, so we could move the meeting date to the 31st, and the submittal deadline could be the 15th.
Is that the will of the group?
Yes.
Sure.
You're going somewhere, Dave.
Y'all don't leave me stuck here without a quorum that much.
Well, that was the other thing,
Because I'll just have to flail in the wind. Not that I don't do that already. But.
All right, we'll change that then to the 31st.
Okay. And so just, if we could have a motion to approve the calendar as submitted with the aforementioned changes in March, that would be great.
So moved.
Second.
All right, motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. That calendar for 2010 has been approved. Next, we'll hear from Planner Robert Lewis regarding continuing education. Hello, Mr. Lewis.
Thank you, Chairman Rogers. I want to reiterate what Matthew and everybody knows, that y'all are still on a tough board. And I've been doing this for 20 years, and this is y'all have a real hard job every time you meet, just about. So I know the city thanks you. In going along with that, we're trying to provide some continuing education.
Some days
just
are
so
better
you can
than
get better.
See, he flatters you, and then he wants to make you go to class.
By the way.
Kill them with kindness.
I'm going to pass out what everybody has accomplished this year as far as, there's only 4 up here. I mean, Chairman Rogers doesn't need one, neither does Mr. Dodd.
Tomorrow.
Most of you got your hours. The city legal department holds a monthly meeting every first Monday of every month, and it's a way to get 1 hour pretty painlessly. If you'd like to attend, if you want to get your remaining credit hours, you can. Here you go, Matthew. You can come to that meeting this first Monday of every month at the legal department, or we have tapes up there in our library. Or if you have any other courses that you may want to attend, just let me know, and we'll see about getting you some credits for that. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. We appreciate you and appreciate your help on getting us in compliance. We sure need it. All right. Any other business to come before the board?
No, sir, that's all I have today.
Then we are adjourned.